The December 4th banned and restricted announcement is here, and I'm here to talk about it top to bottom. What's going on in Modern? Who are the big winners and losers? Is Scam just going to be around in a different form? Let's talk about it here. In general, we're going to be discussing the changes from Modern, Pauper, touch on Legacy a little bit, and then at the end, talk about some big winners and losers with a little bit of mill sprinkled in there. So if that's what you're looking for, hop on in, leave a like on the video, and comment down below what you want to see moving forward. I'm going to be touching on Pauper and Modern, but I'm also going to be making some Legacy gameplay as I hop into the format as well. So this BNR is a great way to jump off from there. Now, from the announcement itself, no changes to Standard, Legacy, or Vintage. Explorer are relevant. Pioneer, we get Karn the Great Creator, Geological Appraiser, Smuggler's Copter unbanned. So Copter's unbanned, the Mono Green Devotion deck is gone, and Geological Appraiser essentially just shuts off the Cascade combo deck. Great. I just don't have much context for Pioneer. I don't play it. Follow your local Pioneer content creator for that. Let's touch on Pauper. Now, specifically with the Pauper format, there was a separate article released along with the video, which I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. So if you want to see my reaction to that, I think there is a very relevant, nuanced discussion to talk about when it comes to Monastery Swiftspear and how nothing else was changed. There are pluses and minuses. I have a lot of thought around this. The Pauper format obviously has a lot of great minds around it, so it's going to be interesting to see where they're coming from, and I'll link down below the article, the video, and everything for you to view ahead of time. And then also with Legacy, I am going to be hopping into the format. You're going to be seeing a lot more Legacy gameplay on the channel, and I am going to be forcing some mill but playing some other decks at the same time. So again, let me know what you want to see regarding Legacy gameplay from myself. Now, to touch on the Modern bans, let's hop onto it step by step. First card is the Beanstalk, addressing the beans, not from Skypiea, from one of the kind of better arcs in One Piece. In my opinion, I love the villain, but Up the Beanstalk banned in Modern. This is a ban that I didn't see happening. I didn't think that we would be banning uncommons in the Modern format, and this just goes to show you how polarizing Modern Horizons is going to be. When we see Modern Horizons 3 come down the format, we are not going to see bans from one of the best selling sets in Modern. We are going to see bans from standard legal sets and uncommon enchantments that draws cards. It's going to be the enablers, not the actual problems in the format that we're going to see banned. So that is going to be the thing going forward, especially with the amount of time that we saw that required Fury to be banned, which you're going to be talking about later in the video as well. But Up the Beanstalk is gone because, well, firstly, rest in peace Thought Monitor. Probably the best version of Affinity right now post Mox Opal banning was the Beanstalk version, in my opinion. You just drew so many cards, you had so many resources, so many ways to come back. The deck desperately needs to draw cards and have resources. Rest in peace. Affinity was barely playable before. It's not playable now, especially with Karn the Great Creator still legal. Don't play this deck anymore. But the Beanstalk version primarily sees two versions. You have the pure Cascade version where you can like cascade from like Bloodbraid to Shardless to Beanstalk and then just like have Fury Solitude backup. You're not going to have the Fury Solitude backup anymore. Or you have the 4-color Omnath version that splashes in the ring and then just like, you know, you can cascade into Beanstalk or Ren as much as you want, but like, or you're not really doing much cascade, but still, it's still a Beanstalk list, some type of Beanstalk control where you're abusing high CMC things to redraw cards. And that's what's important here. These spells being triggered off for more card draw, more resources, why Beanstalk is gone. And it's ultimately why Fury is not in the deck anymore as well, because it was a problem in, you know, just Fury list and Beanstalk list. So this is a more nuanced discussion with Scam, which we're going to talk about, but Fury is no longer in the deck, which is a great bonus for the Beanstalk list. But I think we're just going to see these decks transition to Omnath lists. We had the 4 or 5 color Omnath decks still around. Not much is being taken out of those lists anyway. Omnath is still going to stick around. They're just going to go to Ren and 6 as their primary engine, which, to be fair, it still is. And especially with the One Ring still being around as well, this is just not going to be a problem that we're going to see fixed. Now, the decks are going to have to grind a lot more. They're going to have to be very selective of what they're playing. There's probably going to be, you know, kind of going back to more main board counter magic, more spell pierces. They're not going to be proactive, more reactive like they were before. So the Omnath decks aren't going anywhere, but the Cascade Beanstalk lists are disappearing to just meld into this Omnath list, which is fine. We're going to see a lot less card draw in the format, which is going to be punished a lot less by a certain orc out of the Lord of the Rings set, but that's also another important discussion, which we'll touch on later. Now, to touch on the big problem card of the format, the card that's been holding back much of the modern format, and really, I want to talk about my views on this. Now, I will say first and foremost, I am happy with the step forward. Am I completely happy? No, I'm a consumer of this game. I will never be completely happy. That is the meme of the format itself, but I'm happy with the step forward, so I'm satiated. I will accept it. Thank you, Wizards of the Coast, for banning Fury. Now, the Rakdos scam discussion. So they touched on this in the article. Again, link down below to the BNR article. Check it out down there. This is going to be a long game discussion. And they touched on it in the article in the sense that we're not going to really be seeing Rakdos scam anymore, in my opinion. I don't think, like, without Fury, it's not going to be relevant. Now, will we see Mardu scam? Orzhov scam? Now, that's a whole other separate discussion because we still have Grief in the format. And Grief, I don't think Grief should have been banned because I think, sure, it's egregious. But the card that was holding back most of the format was Fury. But I think there also should have been another unban or two, which in my mind should have been an Orc or whatever. But I think having Grief in the format is going to prove its own problems. We're not going to lose the egregious play patterns we have, but the deck is going to be a lot less consistent, right? It's not going to be as good as it was before. It's not going to be 28, 20, 30% of the metagame sometimes. It's going to be a lot less. It's still going to be a high player though, because without Fury, the article addresses the fact that, well, we have creature decks coming back. I'm noting Mantis Rider just as one of my more favorite creatures, especially out of the 5-color humans decks. Because of cards like Orcish Bowmaster still in the format, we're not going to, well, bring back taxes into the format. Your Thalia Guardian of Thravians are still not going to be playable at all. Taxes, thanks to Ren and 6 and Orcish Bowmasters, are just the poster child example of why these decks will never come back into the format, because this is how Wizards wants to balance this format once and for all. And we're going to see this probably further exacerbated in Lord of the Rings, or not Lord of the Rings, Modern Horizons 3, and it is being exacerbated by the Lord of the Rings set. The One Ring and Orcish Bowmasters is obviously a really powerful magic cards, and with that in mind, I think this leads to one of the bigger winners in the modern format. Even with Fury gone, with some creature decks coming back and Scam disappearing, this card still has a big case for black being one of the more powerful colors in the modern format right now. And so what needs to accompany black as a color pie? Well, it could be white, because a lot of people are talking about how Ephemerate along with Solitude could just be the replacement. And now this obviously isn't as egregious as a 3/3/4/4 double striking creature, but a 4/3 with lifelink and flash just coming down and being able to exile a creature is really relevant too, and then being able to do it again on an upkeep if you're playing Ephemerate. Heck, imagine Ephemerating on your main phase with your Ephemerate, being able to take multiple cards in different phases when your opponent is having to react in different turns. Don't underestimate the power of not only taking cards immediately, 2 cards immediately, but 2 cards spaced out, where your opponent has to interact, has to react. They have to play around the fact that a certain card is coming back that forces action into the average player and can cause them to misplay. So even just the power of losing 2 of your cards initially, Ephemerating a Grief can also be just as powerful. Ephemerating other creatures in different phases can also be just as powerful. So I think Orzhov Grief, Mardu Grief, because some of the red spells like Ragavan are still really powerful, these spells will not go anywhere. So I don't feel confident that the scam menace will fully disappear. We will probably still get scammed over and over again. And I think that is the dark truth about this banned and restricted announcement. I'm happy for it. The changes are great, but I'm an unbanned person, honestly. If it wasn't banning Fury, we should have unbanned something. But let's talk about the winners. So the 2 decks that I think come out the highest, with a 3rd bonus in there, Yawgmoth. I think this is very obvious just with my brief discussion about how black still comes out on top thanks to Orcish Bowmasters, but this is just a combo deck of so many options, especially with the recent addition of Agatha's Soul Cauldron. The deck has so many ways to tackle so much of the meta with certain, card disruption, life gain, recursion, like just so many answers. I mean, Orcish Bowmasters just does everything. So if the 5-color, 4-color Omnath decks are going to be around in the format, drawing and gaining value, Orcish Bowmasters and combo decks will be around to punish them. And I think that's what my biggest fear is. And in the middle, you essentially have to have some type of fair control deck as well. And that fair control tempo deck is going to come in the sense of Murktide region, ultimately because it abuses, just like the Scam deck does, one of the best red 1-drops ever printed in the history of Magic the Gathering. This is probably the best red 1-drop ever printed, honestly, because of how format defining it is, being banned in Legacy, for crying out loud. Okay, so Ragavan Nimble Perforator just is going to carry the early game potential of the Murktide decks, as it always has, and then the tempo capabilities, the power of a resolved Murktide is going to finish it off in the mid and late game as well. So those are the two winners, I think, out of this banned and restricted announcement. Decks that haven't seen any change out of it and still are just as powerful in answering some of the change decks in the format, the Mardu Scam decks or the new 4 or 5 color Omnat decks. These are two decks that can and have answers against these decks and have gameplay against them as well. Now, the last winner of the whole ban and restricted announcement, in my opinion, as a mill content creator, is the mill deck. Tasha's Hideous Laughter is going to see a big boost in value with a little bit of tentative hesitation, but I think in general it will see some play forward, and that's why I want to dedicate the last part of this video to mill in general. Mill is going to see a big boost just because our crabs are now going to be more survivable. The Hedron Crab, Ruin Crab, 8 Crab Menace was one of the primary it is one of the primary ways that the mill deck has to beat the modern format. You have to answer these creatures because a 0/3, especially out of Ruin Crab, being able to get around the One Ring is a really powerful effect, and it's ongoing. It allows top deck lands to not be quote unquote dead plays at all, and this is why we're going to see that big boost, more survivability in the crabs on the battlefield in general, cards that survive Orcish Bowmasters but still get punished with cards like Visions of Beyond, but still Ruin Crab. Now, Crypt Incursion, I think if the amount of creatures in the deck are going to be increasing with potential returns of the Merfolk decks, which generally, in my opinion, at visual, have ways to beat Orcish Bowmasters with their high toughnesses and everything. And then if you have a lot of creatures entering the graveyard in decks like Yawgmoth, Crypt Incursion is going to be a lot more valuable in the main board instead of just being a sideboard option. And then finally, Tasha's Hideous Laughter. The average CMC of the format is going to go down with the Fury ban, with Fury being on an almost 50% of the metagame, 50% of the winner's metagame in top decks. With that gone, Tasha's Hideous Laughter is going to be a lot more powerful in targeting these mid-range decks. So it's going to be a lot more powerful in the main board as we see more aggressive decks come out as well. So there is a potential that Jace gets filtered out back into sideboards, freeing up some sideboard slots, in my opinion. But the one thing I want to point out is I don't think it's time to get rid of Preordain. I don't think it ever will, because the one thing I want to remind all you mill players is ultimately what this deck comes down to is that we are ultimately a deck that is unable to abuse some of the more traditionally powerful cards that are in the format. Because of the axis as which we attack the metagame, it's very difficult to gain value in traditional ways from cards like Orcish Bowmasters, or maybe a card like Solitude if you're playing Azorius, or even Subtlety was just a result of the Scam metagame. That type of disadvantage is actually really hard to justify in a lot of ways. So Preordain having selection is going to be really key if we're going to be peppering in cards like Crypt Incursion, maybe mainboard Ensnaring Bridges, or trying to find Surgical against the combo decks, because Cascade decks are still around. Preordain is still going to be one of our more powerful cards right now. Still play this card. It allows you to keep so many greedy hands. This is the card that we are truly looking to abuse moving forward. I highly recommend against taking it out, especially moving forward. Now, those are my thoughts on the banned and restricted announcement. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on even the Pioneer format. What do you think? Is Modern fixed? Are we going to see Mardu Scam and Orzhov Scam make it into the Modern format forced because of now people can't, scam out a Fury, but they can scam out still other cards like Solitudes? Let me know what you also think of the Pauper bans ahead of the next video I'm going to make for tomorrow in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And well, till next time, maybe you'll catch me in the leagues jamming a little bit of deck flippy.